Hey everyone. So I suppose just like to say thanks for having me here today. But just speaking from what I actually take from the proclamation, and having looked at a lot of these men and women over the last few years, I would like to think of that was a hopeful document. That it's not perfect. It's far short of being perfect, but at its core, there is some noble ideas in that, with respect or with reference to cherishing all the children. If you look back at the groups like Anina Naharan, who from 1900 been founded by Maud Gonne, who were looking at the ground level, the ordinary citizens of Dublin, the poorest people in the city, with very little options for their future regarding education and so on. And they decided to make a difference. It's a huge difference in a way, by educating these children, boys and girls. And what you find with that, it doesn't leave those women. And it is, to me, enshrined in the proclamation that the children of this nation are to be protected. They are the future after all. And you do find later on, when after 1916, that the women hold up this document. And as a woman, to see Irish men and Irish women there, it's a huge thing that women are seen to be equal in this new Ireland. Unfortunately, as we know, that didn't actually happen when the state was established after the treaty was signed in December 21. But it's a start. As I said, it's not perfect. And in relation to the men that signed, those 7 signatories of that document, they knew that by signing that, by putting their name on that, they weren't going to live. And the fact that they were prepared to do that. And in the case of Tom Clark and so on, Tom Clark definitely was a rootless man. He had that lineage with the IRB, whose whole philosophy was to strike a blow against Britain at any opportunity. And he did that. And he knew he would have to lead people into battle. People would die to see his vision. And people would say that was selfish. And yes, it was selfish. But if you look at what had gone before, with the likes of the famine, with the likes of education and so on, where people should have a basic right to live a dignified life, and that hasn't happened. If people have nothing to lose, they become dangerous. And you see that with the 1913 lockout and so on. So everything sort of feeds in to each other. And also, I'd agree with Ruth, as in, these were such a huge, across-the-board range of people who, would they have come together if something like this wasn't happening? I don't think they would, because there were such different characters, like, as Ruth said, when you look at them as individuals, they are so different in their personalities, but there is a common enemy. And that is Britain, that is uniting these people together. I certainly don't think that if the Republic had have succeeded, if the Rising had have succeeded, that it would have been all, happiness and sweetness and light. Because you have Connolly on one hand, and he is for the working class people. He is a Marxist, he is a socialist. He would have very different ideas to those who would be in with the capitalists and so on. So there would have been, I imagine, conflict further down the line. But the common enemy, which is Britain, unites these people for a time. But that happens across the world. When the common enemy is gone, personalities do emerge, and differences do come, and we do sort of see that with our own civil war in 1922. Just with the actual proclamation, not only was it held up by the women of Cumann on and so on, and you see that when the treaty is signed, the women refer to the proclamation and so on, this is what they fought for, this is what they did. You also find within the split, you do have the 2 big groups, which is the pro-treaty side and the anti-treaty side. But then you have the neutrals, who is a very often overlooked group, who try to actually avert civil war from happening. And if you look at their constitution, This was men who had fought in 1916 War of Independence, but they didn't want to go down the line of the Civil War because they knew if we went down that road, there was no coming back from it, or it would be very difficult to get back from it. But the Constitution, it is basically the proclamation, the idea of the proclamation, what is started in that document. They actually take it to a different level. So they have a political party, and their constitution basically reflects what they want for Ireland, for the Irish people. And it is socialist in a way. It's basically about people having the right to education, the right to housing, everyone having this right. So there was some people trying to say, take the proclamation to a different level, actually show what could be done. Unfortunately, the neutrals do not get a look in from either side. And I think that was a missed opportunity with the neutrals to be given a chance to have a platform and to give another choice to the people at a time when so many painful things were happening. Also, just to say that, as I said, it's not a perfect document. The basic principles are there. A lot of work would have needs to be done, but the core values, to me, are noble. Also, just in saying that with the 7 signatories, they do this without the explicit permission, and they do it in secrecy. And Ruth again said with the IRB, they went against even their own constitution in that, as in you had to have the backing of the people behind you if you were going to strike a blow. But if you look then at the less well-known figures, there was a whole load of people who wanted this change, who, for example, the Hales brothers, who I've done so much research on, with their family, with their lineage, going back to the famine, the influence of their father, that the landlords, that, you know, this was something that needs to change. The volunteers and so on, you had people who wanted to make a change, and when you've got groups like Coming On, the volunteers, the Citizen Army, it gave them that vehicle to strike a blow, to actually do something. So these 7 people, in a way, they are, again, the vehicle for the wishes of not all, but many of the young men and women at the time. And also with the Easter Rising, it wasn't just an isolated incident. This was a revolution. It didn't end with the surrender in April, you know, because what you have, although the leadership are dead, with those men that are sent to Frongach and the prisons and so on, they knew they were beaten, but they were going to strike another blow. It would be in a completely different manner, but it wasn't just an isolated incident. It wasn't just a rebellion. This was an actual revolution. And I suppose you see that when the War of Independence goes on, with the setting up of the Republican courts, you have a civil administration there. So it isn't just an isolated incident. Also, what I see in that document is that it's basically given a right for people to live a life with dignity. Everyone on this island, no matter what your religion, no matter what your class, everyone should guess, you know, it doesn't happen, but, you know, education, which is so important, just a decent way to live, and just a chance to be happy and to participate in society, so that society can actually improve and build on what the previous generation has achieved. Again, I think I would just see the beginnings of that with the proclamation. Also, with when you look at the people, this generation of men and women, they were politicised. Politics was coming down the levels to the ordinary man and woman, and they were questioning things, and they realised that, you know, something needs to be done. What they were doing, it wasn't perfect, but at least they did something. They made a stand, and it takes a lot from a person to actually stand up and do something like this, to question, you know, the norm. And they're not always right, they're not always wrong, but to stand up, to take that brave decision and stand up, because when you look at what their life could have been, When you look at these men and women, what came after it, the freedom that they fought for in 16, the proclamation that they held up, that wasn't given in 1924, 1932, 1937, especially when you look at the women and what happened to them. But I think that it's a start. And people have to make that stand, people have to make that decision. I would look at these men and women, as I said, it's such a disparate group of people. You wouldn't consider them together in certain circumstances, but they came together. One big thing, though, is that when you look at the women, the work they were doing on the ground level, pre-1916, as I said, from 1900, look at the work the women do after, in the 30s. And women were excluded, as we know, from the mainstream political life. Big politics they weren't part of. But you look at the women, the way they manoeuvre around that, they work through local politics. So the idea of making a change on the ground, the children and so on, they're involved in education boards, health boards and so on. And the ideas of the proclamation are there with them till the very end. I know it's a document that doesn't appeal to everyone personally, on a personal level. I do admire these men. They weren't perfect, but who is? As I said, they made a stand, and it was a good place to start with. It's a noble start, and hopefully I would believe that generation believed the next generation would build from that, and make it become an inclusive society, make it an island for the Irish people, regardless of your religion, regardless of your social class. Make this country a place where we as Irish citizens are protected, where we are given a chance to live a decent life, and let us then contribute to the future of our country. And as I said, I am very proud of these men. They weren't perfect. This document isn't perfect, but it was a good start. Thank you.